Hello, welcome back. This has been a while since I've done a video just because there was a lot going on last semester with school, COVID and all that stuff. Kind of put a big hampering and a lot of extra work away from our videos and stuff. So we're going to start again. We're going to continue on with our astrophotography series. This time we're going to talk about photography. This is going to cover a bunch of different aspects of things. We're going to cover camera optics, what types of cameras are there, full frame, other sensors and stuff like that. We talk about lenses, what f ratios are, what aperture is, all that kind of stuff, just to give you an idea of the terms and everything involved with doing astronomy and starting off with photography first, because these days that's kind of where a lot of people start from, and just because it's a little bit easier to start with a camera that you may already have, or a lot of ways it's a little bit cheaper than buying a dedicated astro camera and a telescope and a mount and then learning all of that stuff, as well as all of the terms and everything involved with this too. So we're going to go through all of that. If it's just like normal, if you guys have any questions during the video, feel free to post them under the video, and we'll answer them as soon as we can get to them. And if it's a good question, we can maybe even add that into one of our future videos on things. So feel free to ask questions in the comments. So let's get going. Part of this video, we're going to talk about different types of cameras. For the main consumer stuff, we only have a few different cameras that we can talk about, and we're going to start off with like one of the older ones. There is an oldest one, but I don't have any examples of those. But we're going to start off with the simpler ones. The first one we're going to talk about is little rangefinder point and shoot. So like this little Nikon that I have, just a little point and shoot camera. Instead of looking through this one, it has an optical viewfinder through here, but it doesn't have an optical viewfinder. So basically the lens and everything is right here. This is the rangefinder design. Then you would look through just the screen right there. These are based off of a design where the optical viewfinder would be a straight through viewfinder right here, and then there would be the camera lens down here on the bottom to some film on the back. That's what this is based off of. So then, back in the day when you would be using these, you would hold it up to your eye, and then you'd have to make sure there's a little bit of you'd have to account for a little bit of parallax between these two. They still make things like that. You can still find them, and the next example of what I'll show you is also a little bit more based off of that. So these are pretty simple. These are not very great for using with astrophotography because they're just kind of basic in their commands and basic in their options and stuff like that. Their sensors are going to be really, really small. You probably can't see, but in there is the sensor, and it's going to be a very small sensor inside of there. So it's not really something that you can really use for that kind of stuff. So we're going to set that one aside. The next version that most people are going to be familiar with is going to be the DSLR. A lot of us have seen these. Basically, what a DSLR is a digital single lens reflex camera. These are based off of single lens reflex cameras from back in the day. Basically, they actually look really, really similar to their film counterparts. Lens in the front and then an optical viewfinder here. You would actually, if you looked inside of here, you would notice that there's a little flippy mirror right here. And it actually is a mirror that sends the light from the lens up into this little area on the top and out right here. So then you're looking directly in the same place as your lens would be, and that's different than the other one that we had, the little lens, this little guy, because then you won't have to account for the little parallax that you would have with this one. So that's what made them a little bit more popular and stuff back in the day. The only difference between this one and the film version of these is that this basically, instead of having a piece of film right in here, it has your digital sensor, and so it would be about right in here. And that's kind of the only difference between these two setups. And so, you know, when you're looking through this, you're comparing these, they're actually pretty similar, like the body style and everything. And these have been around for, you know, a fairly long time. The digital version of these they've only been around since like the mid 2000s. So they're fairly new, unless you were born in the mid 2000s or later, then they seem kind of old to you. But for anybody older than 20 years old, you know, it's kind of, you know, something you grew up with. And then you have the lens on the front. These do have interchangeable lenses, and all that basically means is you can take this lens off and replace it with another lens of a different style, a different focal length, and all that other stuff. And we'll talk about those things later on. But you know, this is, you know, I don't know if it's losing way, but some people are saying digital or DSLRs are losing way to these little things called mirrorless cameras. And here's an example of that. So this is a mirrorless camera. It's kind of similar to this one in that, you know, they kind of have the same body style and stuff. The difference is that this is the lens and everything is kind of more straight through like a DSLR would. So this is kind of like the mix-up between a DSLR and a rangefinder. But this one has the same issue as the other one, depending on what company you get it through. This one you can put a viewfinder up on here, and then it will just show you an image of what you're looking at through here. Some of them just have a little straight through. It just depends on which one you're getting. So, you know, that's the only difference between them. These ones, this one in particular and other styles, have APS sensors, so basically the same sensors as the DSLR. This particular camera has the exact same sensor as the sensor I have on the camera I'm filming this with. So I have a 90D I'm filming with. This is an EOS M6 Mark II. I'm pretty sure they have exactly the same sensors in them. So you can see the difference in size between this one and like the 70D, which is like the older sibling to the 90D. A lot smaller, a lot more compact, and a heck of a lot lighter. So if you're not in for, you know, carrying around, you know, like several pounds of camera gear and everything, these ones are pretty good. These can be used for astro fairly easily, just because they are pretty similar to the DSLR in their functionality, and they have the same lenses and the same sensors. But you can also use the same lenses with an adapter. These particular ones are a little bit different in that the sensor on these has been moved forward towards the mount a little bit more, so that's why they have different lenses for these styles. But you can get adapters for these to use with like the regular DSLR lenses. So if you're ever thinking about upgrading and you want to go to something like this and keep all of your lenses, then you can do that, and you know, you just need to spend a little money on an adapter. But yeah, these are pretty cool. I really like this camera. It's got a lot of functionality. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with it at all. So the last camera that we would talk, well, there's two more. One of the other cameras that we would talk about is called a medium format, and all of the cameras I've talked about so far have little sensors up to APS size sensors, up to 35 millimeter sensors, but there's a medium format camera which have large sensors, and there's actually full format cameras that have even bigger sensors, but those are, you know, way more expensive. You know, like a DSLR these days can go anywhere between, you know, like $300 all the way up to around $5,000, whereas a lot of medium format cameras are into the multiple tens of thousands of dollars. Like a Hasselblad, that would be an example of a medium format, and those are around $30,000. That's just the camera body, I think. Never really used them, so I don't really have that much experience with them. Just familiar with them is all. And then we have your basic Astro camera, and I'll actually introduce those a little bit later. But instead of having, you know, this entire body on here and a a screen and all of your processing and everything built in there with all this little functionality and everything. Basically, an astro camera is the sensor, the readout electronics, so the electronics to actually just read out the stuff on the sensor itself, and then communications device or a communications connection into an external computer. And so, it's like a stripped down version of these, and they have different electronics. They design how things in there work differently. Some of them do have color sensors like these. Other ones are monochrome, which means there's no color information that you get from them, which is why you have to use filters for them. But basically, these are filtered too, except each of the filters are on each of the pixels that are in there, and I'll explain that later. But, astro cameras are just, a broken down version one of these that are more specialized for a singular type of thing. And that goes with a lot of science cameras that you may have heard about on big telescopes and microscopy, things like that. They're just these kind of just bare bones sensors with electronics that read out the information on those. So, a lot of them use similar sensors that some cameras do. There's just a bunch of different aspects that go into those, and a lot of places like to design those specifically for their application, which raises the cost because that company that makes those has to make them really specialized for their kind of thing. But that kind of stuff exists. So that kind of covers our cameras for now. So we'll actually move into the types of camera sensors.